welcome to the Tennessee Informer. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Before we get to our guest tonight, I want to spend just a few minutes on the so-called Signalgate scandal in the Trump administration. So my thoughts are, there was a breach there. It is a problem if you have a reporter that's not supposed to, which no reporter should have been in on that conversation. And I understand, from what I understand, there were not specifics given. He still should not have been on there. It is still an issue. No doubt that that's a problem and it needs to be dealt with. But it seems, a couple things to remember. First off, the Democrats are trying to make a really big deal of this. Okay, that's the same people that really said that everything went well with Afghanistan, or they did not dispute that the withdrawal from Afghanistan was, they thought it was a success. Okay, you didn't hear them go on and on about what happened in Afghanistan, and you don't hear them as far as our national security goes. When the border was wide open, they were okay with that. So you can't really take anything they say serious about any kind of concern for national security. Having said that, I still think there is an issue. The fact that this guy was in on the call, whether important stuff was divulged or not, it is still a problem. I do notice, though, that it seems to be they want to direct their ire more at Hedgepath than Waltz. I don't know anything about this Waltz guy, really, but I think it's going to be interesting down the road. I don't think he'll be with the administration long term. And I don't think this was just one of those accidental things. Somebody did this deliberately. Don't know who, but somebody did it deliberately. So it is an issue. It's not quite the issue they're making it out to be. To me, like I say, the fact that this guy was on there, you got to get to the bottom of that and make sure that kind of stuff doesn't happen again. The Trump administration should know by now they can't trust anybody. They have to be just doubly careful. They have to really scrutinize anything and everything, because if there's any avenue left for an attack, the left will take it. So that's my quick rundown and thoughts on that. I think we'll hear more about that as time goes on. Okay, our guest tonight is Amy Miller. You may remember her from an earlier show when she spoke on behalf of Children's Health Defense, but tonight she's speaking for herself as a mom and on her opposition to House Bill 809 by Rusty Grills and Senate Bill 527 by Senator Stevens. This bill is waiting to be scheduled for a floor vote in the Senate and is scheduled to be heard in the House Judiciary this Wednesday. Here's a summary of the bill if you're not familiar with it, and the title is under pest control. It says, the manufacturer or seller of a pesticide registered with the commissioner in accordance with Section 43-8-104 and with the Federal Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, under the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, which is known as FIFRA, U.S. Code 7, is not liable in a civil action related to the labeling of the pesticide, including a product's liability action alleging a failure to warn under Title 29, Chapter 28, if the pesticide bore a label approved by the EPA under FIFRA at the time of the sale. This section does not apply if a pesticide is manufactured or sold in violation of this chapter or FIFRA. And this act takes effect upon becoming a law, the public welfare, blah, blah, blah. Okay. All right. So basically, she will definitely be doing the bulk of the talking. I'm not an expert on pesticides. I did watch the House hearing from the 18th on this, and I watched part of the Senate hearing on this issue, and I've done a little bit of reading here and there, talked to a couple of people. Now, I'm not a fan of trial lawyers. You hear the old story about, the old joke about, what is 10,000 lawyers at the bottom of the sea? And the answer is a good start. I agree with that, with the exception that I think due to inflation, because that's a very old joke, it's probably 20 or 30 now at the bottom of the sea to be a good start. So that's how I feel about trial lawyers. But that doesn't mean I trust big corporations either, especially not Monsanto and organizations like that. So what is your opposition to this bill based on, Amy?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. This is a really tough time in Tennessee right now as we fight this bill as it's going across the country. But other states are actually killing the bill. So hopefully on Wednesday we can do the same. I have a lot of thoughts on this bill, and you say that, you don't like trial lawyers and you're not fans of corporation capture or anything like that. But I'll tell you, I think I've learned more about pesticides in this whole deep dive than ever. And I've also learned about how many people do not like trial lawyers. So I am not an attorney myself, and make that clear for anything that I say on this program tonight. But it's interesting to see all of the different arguments and the way that they're positioning this bill. So this bill, I'm sure a lot of your viewers have seen the ads that there's been millions of dollars put in by Bayer, and that is who actually brought the bill. And you can tell that there's a marketing message that says, hey, if you don't pass this bill, farmers are not going to have their tools in the toolbox, which means they will not have glyphosate to spray on the crops. And then, as the Farm Bureau said, it was going to be catastrophic. That to me is a fear tactic. My background is marketing, so I can speak to that. It is very much a fear campaign, and it's fitting right into their narrative of what they need to do with these lawsuits that are happening because of Monsanto. And if we can show the slide, the first slide that I want you guys to understand is how is all of this working. So Monsanto, which a lot of us know who they are, they're the GMO king of the crops, right? So they have a product called Roundup. And a lot of people use Roundup. It was glyphosate based, and they had to remove glyphosate as the active ingredient for the lawn side of it. The commercial side still has a different chemical makeup. But Monsanto was bought out by Bayer. And during this time, around approximately the same time as when all the lawsuits started hitting, they set aside $17 billion to pay for these lawsuits from the cancer causing, which they claim does not cause cancer, but all of these cancer lawsuits that are popping up. So you see Monsanto logo there, and then follow the arrow down to Roundup. That's their product, bought by Bayer. Bayer then starts recently, actually, I believe it was the beginning of the year, an organization called Modern Ag Alliance. Modern Ag Alliance was founded by Bayer, and they've collected a bunch of different organizations, such as, follow the arrow again, to partner with, the Farm Bureau and the Tennessee Farm Bureau, Tennessee Soybean, but with this being a national push, it's all these different other company or organizations that are backing them. But they are founded by Bayer. I want you to know that, because in the first hearing that we had, Modern Ag Alliance sent their executive director. She's an attorney, has a lot of farm, degrees and all that, specialties. They sent her in to testify. And she was specifically asked, she chose not to say that they were founded by Bayer, and I think we all know why. And she was asked point blank by one of the legislators, weren't you founded by Bayer? And, she kind of beat around the bush about that. And I actually saw her on the outside of the hearing room. And I said, what you said up there was a little bit deceiving because you weren't forthcoming. And one of her responses was, well, they're the same size of a logo on there, and as a marketing person, I know what she was after, because if the logo's the same size, then nobody's paying a different amount of money usually. Usually the bigger the logo, the bigger they pay for a sponsorship. And she specifically said, we are not founded by Bayer. And I said, yes, you are. I said, I see it on your website. It's on your website, founded by Bayer. And if you look now, go to Modern Ag Alliance, it is on there. And so that to me was, why are you hiding behind this? Well, if we continue to follow the arrows, that the Tennessee Farm Bureau, their alliance organizations, the Farm Bureau, which is the biggest lobby in Tennessee, and the Soybean Association, and if you think of soybeans, they're very heavily sprayed with glyphosate. They are the ones doing the bidding for Bayer, also known as Monsanto, in our state. So this is who the bill was originally brought by, being pushed by these Tennessee organizations on behalf of them so that they can get out of these lawsuits.
Now, to clarify, Monsanto no longer owns Roundup. That's all Bayer. So does Monsanto still have any play in this?
Yeah, I mean, I just took a picture. I went to, oh my goodness, I'm losing the Ace Hardware. I just went to Ace Hardware on Sunday, and I actually took a picture of the label, and it still says Monsanto on the bottom.
Oh, okay.
So they are using the name. But I'm not sure any of the lawsuits, that's Bayer on there. I'm not sure how they're structured legally or anything like that. But yeah, it is still used. And I think even when people are talking about it, a lot of the terms, people understand and recognize Monsanto. They don't really have a great reputation. It kind of leaves a bad taste in people's mouths, but they are known for the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. They will say otherwise, but it's, kind of similar to the vaccine world. When you have a bunch of mothers who are saying my kid was injured after this vaccine, and then they deny it, but, there's a bunch of people saying it. So, and which brings me to the playbook. The playbook is exactly the liability-free status of what happened during the vaccine court in 1986. So this is the same playbook: get immunity and then expand it. It's kind of alarming. And if you think about it, Bayer is also has a pharmaceutical side. So they have products that actually treat Parkinson's, which is interesting because Paraquat, which is another chemical, a pesticide company by the name of ChemChina.
ChemChina.
So we'll get into that in 2 seconds because
okay.
They are known for Parkinson's, and they have lawsuits because of Parkinson's. But that leads me back to who's ChemChina? Well, ChemChina, under this bill, would be protected, and they would have a liability shield for their products that are known to cause Parkinson's. They actually purchase Syngenta, so some of you may know them as Syngenta. But it is a foreign company that has ties to the CCP.
ChemChina, right? ChemChina. And they have company. They're here in the U.S. Do they have businesses here in Tennessee, I assume?
They're a registered pesticide in Tennessee. So anything that is registered in Tennessee that falls under the definition of a pesticide will be included in this liability shield under the language of the bill.
So Bayer is German, correct?
Bayer is German, yes.
And ChemChina, so Krauts and Chicoms, okay. So what do we have next? Okay, wait a minute. We've mentioned glyphosate, right?
Yes.
Okay, and that's what you hear on the commercial. That's all I hear about on that commercial, that Modern Ag Alliance commercial. But that's not the only pesticide that will be given immunity, right? So how many are going to be given immunity?
So there are over 15,000 registered pesticides in the state of Tennessee, and according to the language that's written on the bill right now, that will cover all of them.
But that bill does not give a number, and it doesn't give a name. It just talks about labeling and essentially the state deferring to the EPA. That's the way I read it.
Well, so in the Senate, there's an amendment on the bill. On Wednesday, the bill is as written. So the bill, let me pull up my bill here. As written, it just says the manufacturer or seller of a pesticide registered with the commissioner in accordance with FIFRA. So there's no name. It's not just glyphosate. That's what they have your attention on because they want you to think that that tool is being removed if you do not vote for this bill. And Tennessee Farm Bureau even went as far as to say this is catastrophic if you do not vote for this. What's catastrophic is if you do vote for this bill and you give liability shield to all of these companies, and if you take the glyphosate, that label is based off of fraud.
How so?
Other way.
How so?
If you go, actually, I have a couple slides on that to give you a little sneak peek of it. There were internal communications that were discovered, by the way, during discovery process. So this bill is removing your civil action to be able to have a jury trial, and you wouldn't be discovering that because you wouldn't have the ability to do that. So that's another warning of this bill being passed. But if you read, take a look at what I have highlighted there. We have enough to sustain our conclusions. Don't need gene tox or EPI. If I can kill this, I should get a medal. So what the background of this is, you see the name Dan Jenkins. He's the regulatory affairs guy for Monsanto. And they were up against another, it was, let's see how to say in layman's terms, there were two reviews of glyphosate. And Monsanto wanted to have control of one of them so that they could control the outcome. And he made the comment, if I get this basically killed where we don't have to look at this study, I deserve a medal.
Now,
so to
part of that, it said something was irrelevant. It said a certain test was irrelevant.
So they're talking about it's the IARC. So they were talking about with the WHO, they said, oh, we're not, that information that came out, this was later, that came out is not relevant. In this one, let me see, they really were after not having that second review of that ATSDR review. And they went to, in other emails, they actually told people in their communications that, maybe this just isn't the best use of your money. We're getting ready to come out with this. Please hold your information. Let's talk before you do that, please. So if you imagine, if you and I had the same, we were looking at glyphosate the same, and I was like, oh, I'm afraid of what you're going to say because it's not going to be favorable to me. I need to figure out how to wine and dine you so that we can get the outcome that we want. That's collusion. That is manipulation. That is not fair science.
Now that was Monsanto official Jenkins, and who is he? Who is this written to?
So that one, oh my goodness, let's see. There's so many of those emails. That one was written to. It's internal with Monsanto. But they're all saying, if I get this passed, and Donna Farmer is one of the names. Donna Farmer is a toxicologist for glyphosate. She was internal for, there you go, right there. She really was part of the control team of how we need to make the very clear communication of glyphosate cannot be used interchangeably with Roundup. And because Roundup is actually a mixture, it's not just glyphosate. Okay. And they tested glyphosate, and the EPA was talking about glyphosate. That's why I think they have, from a marketing perspective, they want you to keep your eyes on glyphosate, because glyphosate was told, or basically in the end was saying, well, you can't claim that it's carcinogenic. And we'll talk about that. They went a roundabout way of getting that. Basically it was collusion. I mean, it's straight up fraud of what they did. They worked with the EPA to just ignore the human side so that they could not put that it is carcinogenic on their label. And that's the part that I'm really pushing. How in Tennessee are we looking the other way and not looking at the fact that even the courts, and let me read you this from the courts. It says, this is all the way up from, this took place, oh man, there's emails from, I think, 2003 all the way up to 2022. And they were really fighting, we don't want this warning on the label. And They ghost wrote, they were ghostwriting different studies. They were influencing that so that it would go in their direction. Monsanto was
Okay, on the Roundup or on the glyphosate?
on the glyphosate.
Okay.
And so their product being Roundup, but that was part of it. But the glyphosate was what they were after. So I'm going to read you this. This is from the the courts that happened. This is in California. It said on June 17th, 2022, after the briefing had been completed, the Ninth Circuit held that the EPA had not adequately considered whether glyphosate causes cancer, vacating the agency's 2020 determination that glyphosate poses no risk to human health. And then you follow it, and it says the Court of Appeals concluded that EPA had failed to follow its own guidelines when reviewing glyphosate, and that substantial evidence did not support the agency's conclusion that glyphosate is not likely carcinogenic to humans.
And that's never been overturned, because I know the Ninth has a history of getting overturned if we're thinking about the same Ninth District there. But that is still has been upheld at this point.
That has been upheld at this point. So they went around their own processes, the EPA did, and what happened was they basically took out the component of the human testing, I guess. It was very if you take out the human component, then you don't have to claim things.
So how did you do the testing on the humans? I mean, how do you do that?
That's above my pay grade, but I'm not really sure. I just know what the request would be now is that we need the human component done. There's a lot of studies that are coming out now that are linking to cancer, the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, endocrine disruptors. I was just talking to someone the other day in the science world, and she was letting me know about the endocrine disruptors of it's actually creating testosterone in females. So it's going to create confusion there. And again, why are we giving these companies liability shield when they should be fixing their product? If they know and they willingly know and they intentionally know that their product causes harm, they're trying to pass the blame to the EPA to say, well, if they approve our label, we should be fine with that. Well, the label's only as good as the information that the person registering the product is giving them. So if they're withholding information or manipulating information, we have a problem. And it's harming people. It's harming people.
So do we know why the EPA went along with this?
I would just say captured agencies. They go along with it. I mean, think about how big the lobbyists are with Big Pharma, Big Ag, and that's just the way it works. I mean, when I was with Reform Pharma, it's constant. It's the same story, different agencies. It's captured agencies, and that's what seems to be happening right now. But again, we cannot turn our cheek. That is even against who Tennessee is. We have foreign companies trying to get a state law passed.
Right.
What?
Yeah. Yeah, I have a problem with that. I have a problem with, when I listen to that one commercial and it only mentions glyphosate, and then I look, that's not mentioned in the bill, and then I hear that, okay, there's like 15,000 different pesticides out there. So as I'm reading this, unless somebody can tell me different, then I would assume all 15,000 get a pass. And like I said, I'm not a trial lawyer fan, but I think the issue with trial lawyers with civil law, I understand the standard of proof is lower than in a criminal case. And I'm not saying that they should be the same, but it seems to me like the issue to fix the trial lawyers, or at least part of it, is, okay, maybe we make the standard for civil trials higher rather than just give a company immunity, because the three-letter, totally unconstitutional EPA. I mean, there's no constitutional authority for the EPA. I don't know why we're even listening to them. Okay. I mean, that's just another unconstitutional federal agency. And I don't understand why they have the play. I understand we have our own ag department, but it sounds to me like they were just looking for somebody to, do they do their own testing? Does the Tennessee ag do their own testing? Or are they just confer with the EPA.
I think they confer with the EPA because they have the upper hand on whether or not your product gets the label. But again, you're submitting the information on the label, and then once you get the label, it's interesting that they want whether things are on the label that could maybe they're not true, things that make the label. And I know of one instance where one of the pharmaceutical companies put something on their label that they were no longer, they had lawsuit after lawsuit and they had to pull it because it was a false claim. So if you have false claims on labels, or if you withhold information, it can go both ways. Right. So if there's no standard there, why would you take away the discovery process? Why? This is what makes products better. Why they would have no incentive. What they're after too is getting this future technology. So when they use their fear campaign of saying, we're going to pull this product, they have pressure from their shareholders, and they actually just put out their annual report. And if you read some of that, it's very telling. So they have a line in there, we might have to pull this product, and they show how they're a little bit concerned with, where these lawsuits have taken, how they need to clean that up, basically. And then also the new administration. They don't name names, but you can tell that they're a little bit nervous. They're not going to be able to get things as quickly as they have before. And they have a bright future ahead of them because they have new products coming out. They actually have, they released a new product, a GMO soybean, that it was released, I think it was in just a couple weeks ago, I think, if that. And if they're going to pull glyphosate, why would you introduce a new product that is glyphosate resistant so that you can keep using that product? Why would you introduce that now? And then the other thing is in 2028, they also have another new product coming out that will either replace glyphosate or in addition to, because glyphosate is actually not able to kill some of the weeds that they've now created with this chemical. So, business as usual for them, right?
It sounds like the government. Create a problem, then create a solution. Create another problem, create another solution.
Yes, exactly. So I think, again, speaking to the marketing of it, man, you guys have a good thing going. You're going to try to get rid of these lawsuits so that you can look good to your shareholders, clean up your business, and then that's going to be one of their outs for, we have this new product in 2028. We don't really need glyphosate anymore, and, because of all the lawsuits, blah, blah, blah. It plays right into it.
So let me ask something about the lawsuits. So do you know how many ongoing lawsuits there are right now with this product?
Ongoing, I know there's been over 170,000, and I think I've read two different numbers, like 55 to 60,000, I think are still. So they put 17 billion in their pocket to pay for these lawsuits.
Okay.
And we have to remember they're making $2.8 billion on glyphosate. Okay. So, work a few days and you got that covered.
How many have they lost? Do you know? Are they pretty consistently losing?
Yeah, and they just lost another one in Georgia for a $2 billion lawsuit. So the courts are providing the evidence, the harm that's being done. And my question is, when are you going to ask to change your label? When are you going to take up these different studies? And again, that brings me to another point. They're walking around, they meaning the lobbyists and everybody who's supporting the bill, but mostly the lobbyists are walking around saying that these lawsuits need to stop, but our tools are going to be taken away, and we have the what do they say exactly? It's like the label. We should not be penalized for this label because we're not allowed to tell you some things.
That's what I wanted. That was my next thing, the label. I remember hearing somebody I did listen to part of the hearings, and somebody said, this is the label they made it sound as if they didn't have any control over the label.
Yeah, well, if they're going to pass the burden to the EPA, guess whose bill it is? Taxpayers. So that sounds great to them. We'll get off the hook. put it on the taxpayers, and then we'll continue making future products. And that's another thing in their annual report, how much they want to do future technology and need to be protected.
Didn't they say, and maybe I misunderstood this, but that the EPA wouldn't allow them to put it on there?
Mm-hmm.
As if, so they're trying to insinuate that, well, we wanted to put it on there, but the EPA said we could? Is that what is that their claim?
Yes, that is their claim.
So are they admitting that it's a problem?
Well, we have heard that over and over and over, how much they should not. It's almost a poor me case. Well, I tried to get it on there, but they wouldn't let me. I mean, that's what it sounds like. And my question is, with all the studies that are out, because this was one of the latest things that we heard. This is only based off of one study, which was part of the WHO, and how they had a study that said it's probably carcinogenic. Well, let's bring in the emails that are really conflicting on how they are working to ghostwrite, to manipulate, to interfere. Let's bring all of that in, and then let's really ask the question, did you really try to get that on the label, or did you really try to not get that on the label?
Well, if you say that they won't let us put it on there, you're admitting that something is wrong, though. I mean, there wouldn't be anything to put on there if something doesn't add up there.
And if they're asking for it, they should have the science to back it up, because when you go and say, hey, we have updated information, here's the background of why we're asking this to be updated. I don't.
What's the state commissioner of ag, what's their position on this? Because if they're being told, if this private company is saying, well, the EPA wouldn't let us put this on there, what is the state saying? Well, the EPA won't let you put it on there. Okay, I guess we're okay with it. I mean, the state still has a responsibility, State Ag Commission, have they done testing on this? Have they said, hey, well, let's see, is there something here, or is it just more BS from the WHO? I mean, I don't know. It sounds to me like they're just going along for the ride.
Well, they asked in one of the earlier times, the Department of Ag, they asked, and she said that they're not, the lobbyist said that they're not really, well, she's a commissioner, I think, for the Department of Ag, but she said, oh, I'm not really up on this. We don't really, we're not really speaking to it.
We'll do whatever the EPA tells us to do.
Well, and I think you've got, with farming, it's so big here that we need these, right? They've made these farmers dependent on these chemicals, and it's the big farmers that are speaking out. And I will tell you that we've spoken to several small farmers, and I mean like 200 acres, regenerative farmers, small farmers, and we've also talked to some farmers that are even switching a little bit, like from conventional farming to trying to do some more regenerative farming. And we were told we cannot speak out because it could affect us.
In what way?
Once again, we have the same issue. Remember back in COVID, you had these doctors who, I think of Dr. Merrick in particular. He was like the world-renowned doctor. He was second most published in the world. He had all these things, protocols, and he was great. And then one day he said, hey, ivermectin and hydroxy can help you. And the next day he was completely discredited, lost his job. That's what I feel like this is. If you are a regenerative farmer, it's almost like, yeah, you're not a real farmer. We need.
So what's the cutoff for a real farmer? You got what certain amount of acreage? Is that you got to have 3,000, 5,000? What is it?
I think from just my observation, I think it's you need to use the chemicals. You need to be whatever the big ag narrative is, however they farm, and you need to make sure you're feeding the world. They do not. You cannot get anywhere with we've got to feed the world. We've got to feed the world. And matter of fact, the not Monsanto, the Modern Ag Alliance and Bayer, actually it's on Bayer's website. They say that they are going to do regenerative farming now. And you know what they're going to do with it? They're going to scale it. And if you know anything about regenerative farming, it's not about scale, it's about duplication. So, they don't want to have FOMO, I don't think, because they know that that's the coming wave. Regenerative farming is, support your local farmer, understand what's happening at your farm. And so now they're going to get a piece of that and they're going to try to scale it.
Okay, so regenerative farming, can you put a little more of it? I mean, you described some of it right there, but can you give us a little more of a definition for regenerative
Well,
farming?
I'm not a farmer, so I'll probably butcher this, but what I know is I'll tell you in layman's terms what
Or
I
maybe
know.
you can tell me what it's not, and that'll help.
So they don't usually use chemicals. They take their animals and they graze them, but they're not grazing on all of their acreage. They're doing a small portion and they rotate them so that the grass gets plentiful. I say that wrong. The I know I'm going to butcher this, but if you imagine you take a square box and you cut it into thirds,
Right.
you rotate, they graze into thirds, and that way your grass and your soil become healthier, and your roots get deeper, and your animals get fed. And if you've ever seen a video of a regenerative farmer showing the conventional process versus the regenerative process, the regenerative is always lush and green and growth, and it's amazing. And you can farm however you want. Again, this bill is not about whether or not you can use glyphosate or not, but I will say it's amazing when you can see how your animals are raised. And I don't, just personal experience. We have pigs now, and I actually was trying to look up a video, and I saw the conventional farming of pigs, and my face says it all right now. I was appalled actually with what I saw.
So the bill, it basically just provides protection from the company. It doesn't stop. If the bill passes, it's not like, okay, we're going to outlaw. I mean, if the bill doesn't pass, it's not like, well, glyphosate's going to be outlawed or whatever. This is just basically just protection for the company. And I understand that some of the representatives that, they're listening to their farmers, and maybe the bulk of their farmers, believe that they have to have this to survive. Now, the whole feed the world thing, I understand you want as much of a market for your product as possible. Any company, any kind of business wants that. I got that, but it's not your job to feed the world. Okay.
No.
I mean,
No.
that is, I guess that's nice for, financially, but that's not your job to feed the world. Anyway, I know that's not the big overall theme here.
No.
But you mentioned early on, though, that other states, other farming states, now Tennessee's a big farm state, no doubt, but there's some other pretty big farm states that have said no to this bill. Is it in the same form for the most part?
Yeah, some of them, even Missouri has one right now, and they specifically say cancer. So that's another reason we know Bayer's behind this. They're trying to stop cancer lawsuits. So that Missouri, well, Oklahoma just killed their bill. They are definitely in alignment with what President Trump wants, and they want to make sure that they're pulling chemicals out of the food. And I don't know if you know or not, but glyphosate is found in just about everything. It is found in your food, in your water, even in breast milk. So it is getting everywhere, and it's time to look at the studies. They're out there.
Right. So there were some other big farm states that have passed. I think you mentioned
Oh, yeah.
Nebraska.
Wyoming and Iowa, actually, they passed it in the Senate, but the word is that they're absolutely going to kill it in the House. The House has no desire to do this, and they've killed it for 2 years in a row. So if you think of Iowa,
Yeah.
that's a real big farm state.
Absolutely. Now Georgia passed it, but I mean,
They passed it, but we're waiting. The governor has to sign it, and he didn't sign it right away. But who knows? That's the first state to actually pass the bill and is waiting on the desk of the governor.
of course, Georgia has just about as many reptiles in their supermajority as we have in ours, so it shouldn't really be that big of a surprise. I'm really, I put a little more weight on these other states, these other big farm states. So it's not a slam dunk that, oh well, all the farmers everywhere are in agreement that we need this.
No, but what's interesting is if these other states are not passing it, they painted the picture of doomsday if we don't pass it. They're not, like, they're still continuing on.
Right.
They're not, they're still a state, they're still farming, they're still able to get glyphosate, they're still able to get other products. This, like I said, it includes paraquat, it includes all these other things that you can use. But again, the bill does not take away the tool.
Right.
And all, yeah, you may say, oh, we might have to, but if you really read the information that Bayer is putting out, they're really positive about everything, not taking away the tools. And so I don't know. I'm not them, but at the same time, I see a lot of information surrounding it that says, I don't think they're really doing that right now, especially at $2.8 billion.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like they're losing a lot, but okay. Well, anything else on this? Any other points you want to make on this bill?
I think it's really important to understand that this is really a federal issue. This should not be done in the state. We do not need to lead, as the Farm Bureau lobbyist said. There's also, I don't think I mentioned this, but as of last week, 5 more Soybean Association lobbyists have registered in the state of Tennessee. So we have Bayer lobbyists, we have Modern Ag Alliance, we have their lobbyists that are just on the ground. Been told they're using Bivens and Associates, which is local to Tennessee, and then they've added these 5 lobbyists. So if you think about all the money that's going in to persuade these legislators, it's really time that the people need to call the shots. We really need to put the power back to the people, and we need you to call. There's a lot of different call to actions out there. We have a lot of different groups that are joining in, and they're really opposed to this bill. The people are opposed to the bill. It does not protect farmers. There's not one thing in the bill that says it protects farmers. And then once you have the manufacturers have the liability shield, guess who's going to come after, who they're going to come after next? The farmer. So I feel like the farmers are being used and sold one story just to get what they want.
Oh, come on, Monsanto wouldn't do that, or Bayer, they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't use the farmers. They wouldn't con the farmers and use them to do this, would they? They wouldn't do that.
Well, according to their background, I don't know. Monsanto was also the Agent Orange guy, and they just have had some bad luck in the past. So I'm not really holding out for this product either. But we do need to know the difference is the marketing that they're using on the front end that you guys are seeing on social media, hearing on the radio. And matter of fact, my husband texted me this morning. He said, oh my goodness, I was listening to one of our soil farmers, and he goes, it paused and it sent me a Modern Ag Alliance ad about the farmers and the weeds. And I'm like, it's everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere. So don't buy the label lie. Don't buy what they're selling you. Listen to the people. Foreign companies should not be calling the state law, persuading legislators. Please show up on Wednesday. If we can say anything, please show up. Bring your kids. Bring whoever. If you have farmer friends, bring them. We need to pack the room. It is really important. And just remember, this is not a small issue. This is liability shield for an entire industry of pesticide manufacturers. And this is the same playbook that they did for the vaccine industry. And we know where that left us. And that's a huge state burden.
We've got one more slide here, if you want to read over that a little bit.
So this one, they're claiming that the WHO is the only study that they have. This is just one study, but this was out of the University of Washington. They actually concluded that over 40% increase when people use Roundup, it's an increased risk for cancer. So it says right there, and there you have it. And they do a lot of studies out there, but that's just one of several studies.
So this is not just based on something the WHO says, so another
Correct.
International organization we probably shouldn't listen to near as much as we do.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, there's a lot of different studies, and I just, that's really important.
Okay. So it's going to be in the House Judiciary Committee. Now, I don't have the numbers or anything, but if you can go to I'm pretty sure if you can go to the state website, number one, you can look up the House Judiciary Committee, or Tennessee Stands, I think, has the list. If you can just go to Tennessee Stands and look it up, and you can call those numbers. I don't know if you have another contact, but if you can't be there, because a lot of people can't be there, call, email, let them know where you stand on this.
And I will say other states have actually applied this pressure by the people, and that's what persuaded other legislators to say, you know what, there's something wrong here. We're not going to do this. Yeah. So it's the power of the people. If we're not talking, they are. And I know for a fact they are, because it's crazy how quickly the narrative will change because they've been in their offices.
Right, yeah. Well, and the lobbyists are up there 24/7. Okay, you pick an industry, not just this industry, but the lobbyists are always up there. And so, we can't always be up there, but you can call and you can email.
We need to absolutely make their phones ring off the hook and keep emailing them. And we can even get you the information if you need it, the contact information. But it is the House Judiciary Committee. Tennessee Stand for Health Freedom. I know the Libertarian Party is big on this. There's a lot of people that are really against this bill.
Yeah. Interesting thing. I watched part of the Senate hearing, and you had Senator Gardenhire on there.
We did.
Now Gardenhire, that guy really needs to go. But anyway, we're talking. It's funny because they're talking about the trial lawyers, and Gardenhire up there, and Gardenhire is supporting this legislation. Yeah. But he apparently knows the head of the Trial Lawyers Association really well, because he made it a point in committee to say, hey, look, am I not with you guys on most everything? And I'm paraphrasing here. And you guys are, I think he said that they're his biggest financial supporters. Now, so I'm like, okay. Yep. That just seemed kind of strange that he would bring that up, but it's not surprising because of the way he votes. It doesn't surprise me that he's with the trial lawyers on most everything. That's not a surprise. But here's what I think: with as pro-illegal alien as he is, if this bill was presented as preventing illegal aliens from filing suit, I guarantee you he'd be opposing it. If this bill was going to prevent illegal aliens from suing, then he would probably oppose the bill. That's just my guess.
Well, I don't know. That hearing in itself was quite interesting, and I am actually in Senator Gardenhire's district, so.
You got my sympathy.
Yeah, that was something.
Okay.
And it's funny. I teach my daughter's homeschool co-op. We meet one day a week, and I teach civics. And I make it a point. This is what government is supposed to act like. And we're doing state government this year, this part of the year. And I say this is what it's supposed to, but I don't hold out on them. I say this is how it's actually working. Right. Is this right or is this wrong? And they've been following the pesticide bill. They actually came up and we toured and they sat in the hearings and things. And it was interesting because I've had them weigh one side versus the other. And so far, they're saying the people that oppose it are more organized than those that are for the bill. And that is based off of their observations of what they're watching. But I don't sugarcoat it. I let them know that there are things behind the scenes that happen. There are things that shouldn't happen, such as calling a quick vote, question on the bill before everybody's allowed to ask questions. And that happened in the House.
Yeah, I saw that. I was surprised about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we talk about the dirty games in politics. They're going to be self-governed citizens. So we have to tell them how it works, unfortunately.
Absolutely. Well, hey, appreciate all the information on this, and glad to have you on. Glad to have you back, and we'll see how it goes Wednesday. I just, I don't, like I say, I despise lawyers as much as anybody, but I don't think we should. I don't think this bill does not need to pass, in my opinion.
It doesn't need to pass, and I'll tell you, if you do get hurt, and I have friends with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and if you do get hurt, one of those attorneys is going to be able to help you. And that's where I think, we've been told even by different legislators, no frivolous lawsuits. And I understand that. I don't like frivolous lawsuits. I sat on a trial from a frivolous lawyer.
Right.
And that's not, I don't think that's what we're dealing with here. I think we have fraud, we have internal emails, we have that evidence, and they're still choosing not to change their label. We have study after study now, and the fact that they're not changing their label, what's going on?
Right, right. Well, and once again, if civil trials, if it's the level of evidence required in civil trials, then that's a different issue. So maybe the standard to win a judgment in a civil trial needs to be a higher standard than we currently have. But to take away the ability to have a day in court
Yeah.
at the urging of corporations, I'm not okay with that either. I have a problem with that. So
I did learn Tennessee's pretty locked down with what you can win here. There's not, I don't want to say you can't win, but in other states you can win a lot more. So they do have caps on things.
yeah. Well, I was talking about not just the caps. I mean,
Yeah.
caps, that kind of. I'm looking more at the standard of what it takes to get a conviction, and I understand it's never going to be as high as in a criminal court. But I think if there's an issue with that, then you make that a higher bar, but you don't take away the ability for people. Guess what? Trial lawyers are going to be rich either way, because you're going to have the trial lawyer for does anybody think that the big companies don't have trial lawyers on retainer?
Oh, yeah, they do.
And they'll work for whoever's paying them. So, I mean, that's what they do. That's how they make their money. So it's not like you only have the trial lawyers that are suing on behalf of the person who claims they were hurt. The other side's going to have trial lawyers too.
Well, I think you said it best, though. I think that you should have the ability to have a trial, and I think that all companies should be accountable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, hey, thanks for coming on. Thanks for all you do, and we'll see how everything goes. Take care of yourself.
Thank you very much. Thanks. I appreciate it.
Have a good one. I want to thank the audience for taking the time to watch our program tonight. Please be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons, as well as the notification bell, so you never miss an episode. We appreciate all your support. Check out our audio podcast on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and other platforms as well. Sign up for our weekly newsletter at our website, tninformer.com. Please find and follow us on Facebook and Twitter at tninformer.com. If you want to learn the Tennessee Constitution so that you know what is lawful, then here's your chance. Attorney Jeff Cobble will be teaching a class on the Tennessee State Constitution Saturday, April 12th from 1 to 6 p.m. Central at the Peachtree Learning Center located at 100 North Main in Sparta, Tennessee. That building is a converted church. It'll be pretty easy to recognize. Call 931-316-9639. Class is free, but donations are accepted. Guests next week will be Kathy Henners, author, retired police officer, and expert on Islamic infiltration and the threat posed by them. We'll be discussing CAIR and Hamas and their links in Tennessee. Hope you'll join us again next week. That's it for now. Good night from Paris, Tennessee, that is.